Some kings are made by crowns. William Garver was almost destroyed by one, until a servant girl he never noticed reminded him what he was king enough to lose everything for. He thought silence was her nature. He never asked why she flinched at the sound of his voice, why she vanished the moment he entered a room. He never wondered why his wolf refused to look away from a woman who wanted nothing from him at all. Then one stormy night, she disappeared, and what William Garver found at the end of a forest road would cost him his bride, his mother's trust, and everything he believed about the 6 years he could not remember. The heavy doors of Blackthorn Palace stood open long after the servants had gone still for the night, torchlight stretching thin across the empty corridors. In 3 days, Alpha King William Garver would stand before his kingdom and name Lady Evelyn Hawthorne his Luna. The nobles were already celebrating. The alliance was already written into law. Everyone had already decided how this story would end. Everyone except William's wolf. For weeks something had gnawed at him, quiet, patient, impossible to name. Not doubt about Evelyn. Not fear of the crown. Something smaller. Something he kept catching out of the corner of his eye. Catherine Wilcox. She never lingered in his presence long enough to be noticed. She never sought his favor, never lifted her eyes when he passed, never once asked to be seen. In a palace full of people fighting for his attention, she was the only one who seemed determined to disappear from it entirely. William had told himself it was fear. Servants often feared kings. But his wolf did not call it fear. He called it recognition. He didn't understand why, not until the morning Catherine failed to appear for her duties. He noticed before anyone announced it. Her absence sat wrong in his chest, a silence where there should have been the soft sound of her moving through the East Hall with a tray balanced against her hip. "She's probably ill," Evelyn said over breakfast, not looking up from her correspondence. "Servants get ill. It happens. She's never been ill." The words left him before he decided to say them. Evelyn's pen paused for half a second. Then continued. "Then she's overslept. I'll have someone check." William said nothing more. But something about that pause stayed with him. By midday no one had checked. By evening he stopped pretending he wasn't waiting. Catherine Wilcox had not missed a single day of work in 5 years. He knew this the way he knew the borders of his own territory, not because he'd studied it, but because his wolf had been keeping the count without asking permission. Storm clouds gathered over Blackthorn as the last light disappeared. William told his guards he wanted to walk alone. They didn't argue. Kings were allowed strange moods before their weddings. He didn't walk toward the palace gardens. He followed the pull in his chest toward the tree line, past the last of the torches, into the dark seam between the palace walls and Blackthorn Forest. Rain started somewhere in the first mile. He didn't stop. Her scent was faint but unmistakable, something he'd never allowed himself to notice before tonight, because noticing it meant admitting something he wasn't ready to name. It led him down a path few in the palace knew existed. To a cottage half swallowed by trees. Windows dark. Door standing open to the storm. Wrong. Everything about it was wrong. He crossed the threshold with his heart already ahead of his thoughts. The front room was destroyed. A chair splintered against the wall. A shattered clay jug bleeding water across the floorboards. And beneath the single candle Catherine kept burning by the window, dark stains that no amount of rain could explain. Catherine. She lay near the hearth, unmoving. A thin line of blood traced from her temple into her hair. William was on his knees beside her before he realized he had moved. 2 fingers pressed beneath her jaw. Waiting. Begging. There. A pulse. Weak. But alive. Relief lasted only a moment. Because then he heard a small voice behind him. "Please don't hurt my mama." William turned. A little girl stood pressed into the shadow of an overturned chair. Small fists clenched at her sides. Her chin lifted with a bravery that didn't match how badly she was shaking. Rain-dark hair. A face too young to carry that much fear. And eyes. Eyes he recognized without understanding why. His own eyes. Looking back at him from a child he had never met. The storm outside roared louder. William's mind went completely silent. "Who are you?" he whispered. The girl didn't answer. She only stepped in front of her unconscious mother, small and fierce, protecting the woman who had clearly been protecting her all her life. And in that moment, Alpha King William Garver realized the truth he had never been prepared to face. The woman he ignored. The woman he forgot. The child he never knew existed. They were connected to a past someone had stolen from him. Before we uncover the truth behind William Garver's forgotten past, make sure to support this story by hitting like and subscribe for more emotional fantasy romances filled with secrets, betrayal, and impossible love. Now let's find out what happened 6 years ago, and why Catherine Wilcox was forced to disappear. The storm outside continued to rage, but inside that small cottage, William's entire world had already begun to fall apart. The girl didn't move, didn't blink, just stood guard over her mother with a courage no child that small should have needed to learn. William lowered himself slowly, palms open, the way he might approach an unfamiliar wolf rather than a frightened human child. "I'm not going to hurt her," he said. "Or you. I promise." The word promise seemed to mean something to her. Her chin trembled just slightly before she held it steady again. "Mama's hurt," she whispered. "She won't wake up." "I know. I'm going to help her." William kept his voice low, even the tone he used to calm spooked pack members after a border skirmish. "What's your name?" A long pause. Rain hammered the roof. Somewhere outside, thunder rolled low across the tree line. "Emma. Emma." He said it like it mattered because somehow already, it did. "I need to carry your mother to the palace, where the healers can help her. Will you let me do that?" Emma looked at Catherine, then back at William, calculating in the serious way small children sometimes did when the world had already taught them not to trust easily. "You won't hurt her," she said. Not quite a question. "Never." She stepped aside. William lifted Catherine carefully, cradling her against his chest, feeling the wrongness of how light she was, how her head fell against his shoulder without resistance. His wolf pressed close beneath his skin, agitated, protective, furious in a way he didn't have language for yet. Emma trailed behind him through the ruined cottage, snatching a small woolen blanket from a chest by the door before following him out into the storm. She didn't cry. She didn't ask to be carried. She simply walked, small and soaked and determined, refusing to fall more than 2 steps behind her mother. By the time they reached the palace, William's guards had already been alerted by his absence. Servants scattered at the sight of their king drenched and carrying an unconscious woman through the front gates, a child at his heel like a shadow no one had accounted for. "Get the healers," William said, and the words cracked through the hall like a command meant for war. Catherine was taken to the West Wing infirmary, healers descending around her in practiced motion. Emma tried to follow and was gently stopped at the door by a nurse's hand. "No." Emma's voice rose, sharp and frightened. "I want to stay with Mama." "Let her through," William said before he understood why he cared. The nurse hesitated, then stepped aside. Emma sat at the edge of Catherine's cot, small hand wrapped around her mother's fingers, refusing to let go even as the healers worked around her. William stood near the doorway, unable to make himself leave, watching a child study her unconscious mother's face like she was memorizing it in case it was the last time. Something about the scene lodged itself in his chest and refused to move. He crouched beside Emma eventually, careful not to crowd her. "She's strong," he said. "She'll wake up." Emma didn't look at him. "Everyone always leaves," she said quietly. "That's what Mama says happens to people we love." The words landed harder than William expected. "Not everyone," he said, though he wasn't sure why he said it, or why it mattered so much that she believe him. Emma finally turned, studying him with an intensity too old for her face. And then, unprompted, she asked the question that had been sitting unspoken between them since the cottage. "Who is your father?" William asked instead, gently, testing something he didn't yet have words for. Emma blinked, confused by the question turned back on her, then answered simply, like it was the most natural thing in the world. "Mama said he was a good man. She said he promised to come back." William went very still. He had never made that promise. Not once. Not to anyone. Or had he? Something flickered at the edge of his memory, gone before he could reach it, like a name on the tip of his tongue that refused to surface. A pressure behind his eyes. A feeling of almost that left as quickly as it arrived. Before he could chase it further, footsteps echoed down the corridor, unmistakable and imperious. Queen Helena swept into the infirmary, her silk robes damp at the hem from the rain, her face composed into practiced concern. William rose to meet her, expecting the question any mother would ask first. "Is she alive?" Instead, Queen Helena's eyes moved past Catherine entirely, landing on Emma with something sharp and unreadable. "Did the child say anything?" she asked. William went cold. His mother hadn't asked if Catherine would live. She'd asked what Emma had said. And for the first time in his life, William looked at his mother and saw something he had never allowed himself to recognize before. Fear. Catherine did not wake that night. Or the next morning. William stayed near the infirmary anyway, dismissing 3 separate attempts by his advisors to discuss wedding preparations that could not wait. Nothing, it turned out, could not wait. Not anymore. Emma refused to leave her mother's side, curled into the narrow cot chair with the blanket from the cottage wrapped around her shoulders. By the second day she had stopped flinching every time William entered the room. By the third she had started answering his questions in more than single words. "She used to sing to me," Emma said quietly, watching Catherine's still face. "Before bed. Even when she was tired." "What did she sing?" Emma shrugged, small and sad. "I don't remember the words. Just that it made me feel safe." William didn't know what to say to that, so he simply sat with her in the silence, which seemed to be enough. He'd summoned Captain Rowan on the second day, the one man in the palace William trusted not to soften a truth for comfort's sake. "I want everything on Catherine Wilcox," William told him. "Where she came from. Family. History. All of it." Rowan returned less than a day later with a folder thinner than William expected, and an expression that told him the thinness was the point. "My king." Rowan set the folder down carefully like it might bite. "There isn't much to find." "Explain." According to palace records, Catherine Wilcox was hired as a servant 5 years ago. Rowan's jaw tightened. "But there's no record of where she came from. No family name. No village of origin. No prior employment. She simply," he exhaled, "she simply appears. As if she didn't exist before the day she started working here." William stared at the folder, the unease in his chest sharpening into something colder. "Everyone comes from somewhere, Rowan?" "Yes. Which is why I don't think this is an oversight." Rowan met his eyes. "I think someone erased her history on purpose. Records like this don't vanish by accident. Someone with authority made her disappear before she ever set foot in this palace." The words settled over William like ice water. Someone had erased a person. Deliberately. Completely. And whoever had done it still walked these halls. He thought of Evelyn's clipped dismissal in the dining hall. "She's probably ill. Servants get ill." He thought of how quickly she'd wanted the matter closed. When William found her later that afternoon, Evelyn was uncharacteristically restless, rearranging flowers that didn't need rearranging, her composure thinner than usual. "Is there news?" she asked too quickly. "Why would there be news that concerns you?" William watched her carefully. Evelyn's hand stilled on the vase. "I only meant the wedding. Everyone's asking about the wedding with all this disruption." William said nothing. But he noted, with growing suspicion, that Evelyn had not once asked whether Catherine had woken up. That night, exhaustion finally caught up with Emma. She fell asleep sitting upright beside her mother's cot, her small body slumping sideways until her head came to rest against William's arm. He went still, unsure whether to move her, unwilling to disturb the fragile trust she'd only just begun extending to him. Then he felt it. A flicker of something beneath his skin, faint but unmistakable. Fear, threading through the bond he hadn't known existed until this exact moment. Emma's fear, somehow reaching him even in sleep. His wolf rose to meet it instantly, protective and alert, the way it never responded to strangers. "Rowan." His voice came out rough. Rowan, standing watch near the door, turned. "My king." "I feel her." William looked down at the sleeping child against his arm, throat tightening around words he wasn't ready to say aloud. "I feel her fear. Like it's mine." Rowan's expression shifted, careful and grave. "My king, that kind of bond. It doesn't form between strangers." He hesitated. "Only blood relatives share that connection." The infirmary seemed to go silent around William, the truth arriving all at once with nowhere left to hide from it. Emma was his daughter. He didn't know how. He didn't know when. But his wolf had known from the very first moment in that ruined cottage, long before his mind caught up to what his instincts had already claimed. He was still sitting with that truth, Emma asleep against his arm, when a small sound came from the cot. Catherine's eyes opened. William was on his feet instantly, relief crashing through him so violently it nearly buckled his knees. "Catherine." Her eyes found his face. Clear. Focused. And then, before he could say another word, before relief could finish forming on his face, Catherine's hand moved faster than he expected. The slap landed hard across his cheek, sharp enough to silence the entire room. The sound of the slap still rang in the room when Catherine's hand fell back to her side, trembling. William didn't move to touch his cheek. He didn't step back. He simply stood there, absorbing it, some part of him certain he deserved far worse than this. "Catherine. Don't." Her voice cracked on the single word, raw from disuse and something deeper than exhaustion. "Don't say my name like you have the right to." Emma stirred awake at the noise, blinking up at her mother with wide, frightened eyes. "Mama?" Catherine's expression softened instantly, the fury draining into something gentler as she reached for her daughter's hand. "I'm here, baby. I'm here." William stepped back, giving them room, his heart still hammering from the strike he hadn't defended against. Rowan quietly excused himself from the room, though William barely noticed him leave. When Emma finally drifted back to sleep, exhausted past the point of fighting it, Catherine turned her attention back to William, and the fury returned, colder now. Controlled. "Do you know how many nights I stood at that forest road?" Her voice shook, but she didn't look away. "Waiting for you?" "Catherine, I don't." "You don't remember." She laughed, hollow and bitter. "Of course you don't." William said nothing because there was nothing true he could say. "You saved me first." Catherine's eyes glistened, though her voice stayed steady through sheer will. "Do you remember that much, at least?" "A hunting party 5 years ago. I was attacked near the northern border. You found me before I bled out in the snow." Something flickered at the edge of William's memory. Faint. Distant. Gone before he could hold it. "You brought me to a hunter's cabin," Catherine continued. "Hid me there while you healed me yourself because you didn't trust anyone else to know I existed. You said," her voice broke slightly, "you said your title had never felt heavier than it did watching me almost die because of who you were." William's chest tightened. The words felt familiar in a way he couldn't explain, like an echo of something he'd once said and long forgotten. "We lived there together. Just the two of us for months." Catherine's hands twisted in her lap. "You told me you loved me under a full moon, William. You told me our bond was real. And then," she stopped, swallowing hard. "Then you promised me you'd return for me. That you'd make it right with your family, your kingdom, and come back for good. And I didn't." The words left him hollow, though he still remembered none of it. "No." Catherine's voice finally cracked completely. "You didn't? I waited at that road every single night for 3 months, William. I told myself you'd been delayed. Injured. I made every excuse I could invent, until I finally understood the truth, that you'd simply decided I wasn't worth returning to." "That's not..." William stopped, frustrated by his own uncertainty. "I don't believe that was true. I don't believe I could have." "Then where were you?" Catherine's eyes blazed. "Where were you for 5 years while I raised our daughter alone, terrified every single day that someone would discover who her father was?" William closed his eyes, and for one dizzying moment, something shifted. A memory. Fragile. Fleeting. Catherine's hands pressing a damp cloth to his fevered skin, murmuring something soft to calm him through the pain. Firelight against her hair. Her laughter, unguarded, echoing in a small cabin far from any palace walls. Then moonlight. Full and silver, pouring through cabin windows. Catherine's face turned up toward his, her fingers laced through his own, the words "I choose you" passing between them in a bond neither crown nor kingdom could unmake. He remembered promising to return. He remembered meaning it with everything he had. But the memory shattered before he could reach the moment after, the moment that mattered most. The reason he never came back. It slipped away like smoke through his fingers, leaving him with nothing but the ache of almost knowing. "I remember," William whispered, shaken to his core. "I remember loving you. I remember promising to come back. But I don't remember why I didn't." Catherine studied his face for a long moment, searching for the lie she expected to find there. She didn't find one. Something in her expression shifted, not forgiveness, not yet, but the faintest crack in her certainty. "You truly don't remember," she said quietly, more to herself than to him. "No." William's voice was hoarse. "I swear to you, Catherine, I don't." Catherine looked down at her sleeping daughter, then back at William, tears finally slipping free despite her best efforts to hold them back. "I believed you chose them over us," she whispered. "I believed you chose your crown over your family." She reached out, hesitant, and touched 2 fingers briefly to his jaw, not quite forgiveness but no longer only hatred either. "But now I don't think you left me at all," she whispered. "Someone stole you from me. Someone stole you from me." The words followed William out of the infirmary and into the sleepless hours that followed. He didn't return to his chambers. He went straight to Rowan. "I want to know what happened 5 years ago," William said. "Every feast. Every gathering. Every reason I might have been near the northern border." Rowan didn't ask why. He simply nodded and got to work. It took 2 days to find the thread, and when Rowan finally laid it before him, William understood why it had taken so long. Someone had worked very hard to make sure it never surfaced at all. "The border feast," Rowan said, spreading old ledgers across the war table. 5 years ago, hosted to celebrate the alliance treaty with the northern Pax. You attended. You returned 3 days later than planned, and the physician's records from that week are. He hesitated. Missing. Entirely. Missing how? Torn from the ledger. Not lost. Removed. Rowan's jaw tightened. I found the healer who attended you that season. He's retired now, living modestly outside the city on a pension considerably larger than his service would warrant. William's stomach turned cold. Paid to forget. Paid to forget or paid to make you forget? Rowan slid another paper forward. I also found correspondence. Burned mostly but not completely. Someone destroyed a stack of letters in the royal hearth around that same time. This fragment survived. William read what remained of the charred paper. Only a few words survived intact. Cannot allow the servant to. Evelyn must be secured as. The boy's memory will fade if. His hands went still on the table. There's more, Rowan said quietly. The seal on what's left of that letter. It's the Queen Mother's. William closed his eyes. Some part of him had known, since the moment his mother asked whether Emma had spoken instead of whether Catherine was alive. Some part of him had known and refused to let himself believe it. He found Queen Helena in her private solar an hour later, seated by the window with her embroidery untouched in her lap, waiting as though she'd known this conversation was coming for 5 years. Mother. William set the charred letter fragment on the table between them. Tell me this isn't yours. Queen Helena looked at the paper for a long moment. Then, slowly, she looked up at her son, and William watched the last of her composure crumble into something older and more tired than he had ever seen on her face. It's mine, she said quietly. The confirmation still struck him like a blow, even though he'd braced for it. You erased her, William said, voice shaking. You erased Catherine from every record in this palace. You paid a healer to hide what happened to me. You burned letters that might have led me back to my own memories. William. You stole 5 years of my life. His voice rose despite himself. And you let me believe I was the one who abandoned them. Queen Helena's hands trembled in her lap. I did what I believed was necessary. Necessary? William's laugh came out broken. Necessary for who? For this kingdom. Helena finally met his eyes, something fierce and desperate rising beneath the grief. Catherine Wilcox was a servant, William. No family name, no alliance, no power to offer this crown. Evelyn Hawthorne comes from one of the strongest noble houses in the north. A union with her secures peace between 3 territories that have warred for generations. So you chose her for me. I chose stability. Helena's voice cracked. I chose a Luna who could protect this kingdom, instead of a woman who could only offer you her heart. I protected your crown, she whispered. William stared at his mother, the woman who had raised him, taught him honor, told him a king's word was his most sacred possession, and felt something in his chest break clean in half. You protected my crown, he said quietly, and destroyed my life. Helena flinched as though he'd struck her. Emma exists because of what you did, William continued, his voice hollow now, drained of the fury that had carried him this far. Catherine raised our daughter alone in hiding, believing I'd abandoned them both. Because of a decision you made for me without me 5 years ago. I didn't know about the child. For the first time, genuine shock crossed Helena's face. William, I swear to you, I didn't know there was a daughter. William studied her, searching for the lie, and found none. Which meant something far worse. Then who did? He asked slowly. Understanding arrived cold and complete, settling over him like ice water. Evelyn had asked that very first morning whether the child had said anything. Not whether Catherine had survived. Only what Emma might have revealed. Evelyn had known about Emma before William himself had. Which meant Catherine hadn't been attacked by chance. She'd been attacked because Evelyn discovered the daughter existed, and understood exactly what that daughter's existence would cost her. The great hall of Blackthorn Palace had never looked more magnificent. Silver banners hung from every rafter, moonstone lanterns cast pale light across a sea of nobility gathered in their finest silks, and at the center of it all stood a dais draped in white, the color of new beginnings, of vows about to be spoken. William stood at its edge in ceremonial black and gold, feeling like a stranger in his own skin. 3 days ago, this ceremony had felt inevitable. Now it felt like a lie he was expected to perform in front of an entire kingdom. Evelyn approached from the opposite end of the hall, radiant in ivory, her smile polished to perfection for the crowd. Only William, watching closely now, could see the tension beneath it, the same nervous energy she'd carried since Catherine's name first entered any conversation. The high priest raised his hands. The hall fell silent, hundreds of eyes fixed on the two of them, waiting for the words that would bind a kingdom's future. We gather today, the priest began, To witness the sacred union? Stop. The word cut through the ceremony like a blade. William's own voice, steady despite the chaos in his chest. The priest froze. Whispers rippled through the crowd like wind through wheat. Evelyn's composure cracked for just a moment. William, what are you? I can't do this. William turned to face the gathered kingdom, his voice carrying clear across the silent hall. Not like this. Not with a lie standing where the truth should be. William. Queen Helena's voice, sharp with warning from where she stood near the throne. Think about what you're doing. I have thought of nothing else. William didn't look at her. His eyes swept the crowd instead. Nobles, guards, servants pressed near the doors, all of them frozen in stunned silence. For 5 years, I believed I had simply forgotten a woman who meant nothing to me. I was wrong. 5 years ago, I loved a woman named Catherine Wilcox. I promised to return to her. And someone in this palace made certain I never remembered that promise existed. The whispers turned to gasps. Catherine is not a servant who wandered into my life by accident. William's voice hardened. She is my true mate. Bonded to me long before Evelyn Hawthorne's name was ever spoken in this palace. And Emma, his voice caught just slightly, Emma is my daughter, my blood, my heir. The hall erupted into chaos, voices rising over one another, nobles turning to whisper urgently among themselves. William let it wash over him and continued anyway, because stopping now would mean the truth stayed buried one more day than it already had. My mother and Lady Evelyn conspired to erase Catherine from every record in this kingdom, William said louder now, cutting through the noise. They paid healers to hide the truth. They burned letters that might have led me back to my own memory. They let me believe I had abandoned the people I loved most, because the alternative threatened an alliance they valued more than my happiness. Evelyn's carefully composed face had gone pale. William, please, you don't understand the pressures. I understand perfectly. William turned to face her fully, and something in his expression made her flinch. You knew about Emma before I did. You knew Catherine posed no threat to you, until the day you discovered she'd given me a daughter. And within days, Catherine was attacked in her own home. I never, Evelyn's voice cracked. I never ordered that. Perhaps not with your own hands. William's voice dropped, cold and final. But you knew. And you said nothing while a woman nearly died protecting our child. He reached up and, with deliberate slowness, removed the ceremonial circlet from Evelyn's hair, the symbol marking her as Luna to be, the crown she had waited years to claim. The hall went utterly silent. I will not wear a crown built on another woman's suffering, William said, his voice steady enough to reach every corner of the hall. This union ends here. Evelyn stared at him, tears finally breaking free, though whether from grief or fury, William couldn't tell any more. He found he no longer cared. He turned from her, from his mother's stricken face, from the priest still frozen mid-ceremony, from the hundreds of nobles who had come expecting a wedding and witnessed a reckoning instead. He walked down the length of the great hall alone, past faces he didn't bother to read, past a throne that suddenly felt like the least important thing in the room. He didn't walk out as their alpha king. He walked out as a man with a promise 5 years overdue, finally ready to keep it. The cottage looked different in daylight. William had only ever seen it broken and rain-soaked, lit by a single dying candle, a scene of violence he still hadn't fully recovered from. Now, under a pale morning sun, workers he'd sent ahead had already begun repairing what had been destroyed. A new door hung straight on its hinges, fresh wood replacing the splintered chair, the bloodstains scrubbed from floorboards that still bore the scars of that night if you knew where to look. He'd come without guards. Without the ceremonial coat, the gold clasps, the weight of a crown he'd removed from his own head the same day he'd taken one from Evelyn's. Just a man in a plain gray shirt, standing at the edge of a cottage that held more truth about his life than the entire palace ever had. Catherine was sitting on the front step when he arrived, watching the workers with an expression he couldn't quite read. She looked up as he approached and something in her posture stiffened, though she didn't tell him to leave. You didn't have to send people to fix this, she said. I wanted to. William stopped a respectful distance away. It felt like the smallest thing I could do. Catherine studied him for a long moment. The smallest thing, she repeated quietly, would have been staying away and letting me rebuild my own life in peace. The words landed exactly as hard as she intended. If that's what you want, William said carefully, I'll respect it. I won't force my presence on you or Emma. But I needed you to know that I'm not asking to be forgiven. I'm asking for the chance to earn it slowly, however long that takes. Catherine looked away toward the tree line, her jaw tight. You keep saying things like that. Like patience is the hard part. Isn't it? No. Her voice trembled, though her eyes stayed dry. The hard part was 5 years of nights wondering if you were dead or if you simply didn't want us. The hard part was watching Emma ask why her father never came, and having no answer that didn't break both our hearts. Patience? She laughed hollow. Patience is easy compared to that. William absorbed the words without flinching, without reaching for the excuse sitting right there in his memory. I didn't know I was stolen from you too. True as it was, he understood finally that it changed nothing about what she'd survived. You're right, he said quietly. I believe someone stole my memories. I believe that with everything I am. But that doesn't erase what happened to you. It doesn't give you back the nights you spent alone, or undo what Emma grew up believing about her own father. I'm not here to defend myself, Catherine. I'm here because you deserve better than what you got, and I intend to spend as long as it takes proving that I understand that. Catherine's eyes finally met his, searching for the practiced words of a king used to smoothing things over. She didn't find them. What she found instead seemed to unsettle her more than anger would have. I don't know what to do with you saying things like that, she admitted quietly. You don't have to do anything, William said. Just let me stay near enough to try. The front door creaked, and Emma appeared on the threshold, watching the two adults with the same careful calculation she'd shown that first night in the ruined cottage. She didn't run to William. She didn't hide from him either. She simply walked to her mother's side and studied him with quiet, searching eyes. Are you fixing our house? She asked. Some of it, William said. If that's all right with you. Emma considered this with the gravity only children seem capable of. Mama said you didn't remember us. That someone made you forget. That's true. Do you remember now? William crouched slowly to her level, careful not to move too fast, too close. Pieces. Not everything yet. But I remember enough to know I never wanted to leave either of you. Emma studied him a moment longer, then asked the question that had clearly been sitting in her chest since the moment she'd first seen him standing in her cottage doorway. Will you leave again? The question hit harder than anything Catherine had said. William held her gaze, refusing to look away, understanding that this answer mattered more than any speech he'd given before the entire kingdom. Never by choice, he said quietly. I promise you that, Emma. Whatever happens between me and your mother, I am not disappearing from your life again. Not for a crown. Not for anyone. Emma didn't smile, didn't run to him, didn't offer the easy forgiveness a lesser story might have written for her. She simply nodded once, filing his answer away to test against his actions in the days ahead. It was not trust. But for the first time it wasn't fear either. And William understood, watching Catherine's guarded eyes soften just slightly at her daughter's side, that this, slow, uncertain, unearned, was exactly where redemption was supposed to begin. The guards found Evelyn's holding chamber empty at dawn. William received the news standing in Catherine's kitchen, a cup of tea gone cold in his hands, Emma's laughter drifting in from the garden where she was chasing something small and quick through the grass. The ordinary peace of the morning shattered the moment Rowan's messenger arrived, breathless from the ride. Gone, Rowan said an hour later, pacing the length of William's study. No sign of forced entry. No struggle. Someone let her out, or she was never as contained as we believed. Guards? 2 dead. Poisoned, near as the healers can tell. Quick, painless, professional. Rowan's jaw tightened. This wasn't Evelyn's doing alone. She didn't have that kind of resource before, and she certainly doesn't have it locked in a cell. William's blood ran cold. If Evelyn had help escaping, it meant the conspiracy ran deeper than a nervous noblewoman protecting her own ambitions. It meant someone else had been pulling threads from the very beginning. That evening, a single black moonstone was found embedded in the door of Catherine's cottage. Driven into the wood like a warning, catching moonlight in a way that felt deliberately unnatural, wrong in a manner William's wolf recoiled from instantly. He was at the cottage within the hour, guards this time, no pretense of leaving his crown behind. Catherine met him at the door, Emma pressed close against her side, both of them staring at the strange black stone with the wariness of prey sensing a predator they couldn't yet see. What is that? Catherine whispered. I don't know. William pulled it free carefully, feeling something unnatural pulse faintly beneath his fingers, cold in a way that had nothing to do with the night air. But I intend to find out. They didn't have to wait long. Evelyn appeared at the tree line an hour later, alone, her once immaculate appearance replaced by something wild and unraveling. William stepped between her and the cottage instantly, every instinct screaming danger before she'd spoken a single word. I didn't come to hurt anyone, Evelyn said, though her voice shook with something closer to terror than defiance. I came to warn you. Why would I believe anything you say? Because you have no idea what you're actually facing. Evelyn's laugh cracked, brittle and afraid. You think I orchestrated all of this? Erasing Catherine, stealing your memories? I helped William, I won't deny that. But it was never my plan. I was only ever a piece being moved by someone far more patient than me. Who? Evelyn's eyes darted to the black moonstone in William's hand, and something like genuine fear crossed her face. I don't know his name. No one does. He approached me years ago, promised me the throne if I helped keep you and Catherine apart. I thought it was ambition. I thought I understood the game. And now I understand I was never playing for the throne at all. Evelyn's voice dropped hollow. Separating you from Catherine was never the actual goal, William. It was only ever the first step. William's grip tightened on the stone. The first step toward what? Destroying your bloodline entirely. Evelyn's eyes filled with tears, though whether from guilt or fear, William couldn't say. Emma isn't just your daughter, William. She's proof of a bond he needs broken completely, not just hidden. He didn't want you to forget Catherine. He wanted your line to end with you, quietly, without an heir to inherit anything at all. A cold wind moved through the trees, unnatural, carrying the same wrongness William had felt from the stone in his hand. Where is he now? William demanded. Waiting. Evelyn took a step back, glancing over her shoulder like she expected shadows to answer for her. He's always been waiting, William. Patient enough to wait 5 more years if he has to. I've told you everything I know. Use it or don't. Before William could stop her, Evelyn turned and fled into the tree line, disappearing into darkness the guards couldn't follow fast enough to catch. William turned back toward the cottage, toward Catherine standing protectively in front of Emma, both of them shaken but alive, and felt something shift solidly into place inside his chest. Whatever was coming, whoever this enemy truly was, William understood with sudden clarity that protecting this small, hard-won family was no longer a matter of redemption. It was a matter of survival. He crossed the distance between them and gathered Catherine and Emma both against him, shielding them with his own body against a threat still lurking somewhere in the dark. Catherine didn't pull away this time. For the first time since he'd found her broken and bleeding in this same cottage, Catherine looked up at William and saw not the king who had forgotten her, but the man who had once promised to protect her, finally, fully standing exactly where he belonged. There was no priest waiting at a gilded altar. No crowd of nobles pressed shoulder to shoulder in silk. No political vows written by advisors who had never once asked what William actually wanted. Just the tree line at the edge of Blackthorn Forest, the same clearing where a cabin had once stood, the same patch of sky where a younger, less broken version of William had first promised forever to a woman he was too foolish to protect properly the first time. Catherine stood at the center of it in a simple gown the color of moonlight, her hair loose the way she wore it when no one important enough to impress was watching. No crown waited for her. No title. Just William standing across from her under a sky slowly filling with silver light. You didn't have to do it this way, Catherine said softly, though the way she looked around the clearing suggested she wouldn't have wanted it any other way at all. I did, William said. This isn't a ceremony for the kingdom, Catherine. It was never supposed to be. It's for us. And for her. Emma stood between them, dressed simply despite William's insistence weeks ago that she deserved silk and jewels befitting a princess. She'd refused all of it, choosing instead a plain blue dress that made her look, William thought, exactly like a little girl rather than a political statement. Am I doing this right? Emma whispered, glancing between her parents with the seriousness of someone entrusted with an enormous responsibility. You're doing it perfectly, Catherine murmured, squeezing her daughter's hand. The moon rose fully above the tree line, full and silver, exactly as it had been the first night William made a promise he hadn't been given the chance to keep. He felt the weight of that failure even now, even standing here with everything finally in place to make it right. Catherine. William's voice was steady despite the enormity pressing against his chest. 5 years ago I made you a promise under this same moon. I don't remember the exact words anymore. That memory was stolen along with so much else. But I remember the feeling. I remember choosing you completely without hesitation before I understood what a crown might cost me for making that choice. Catherine's eyes glistened, though she held herself steady, the same quiet strength that had carried her through 5 years alone. I lost 6 years because someone stole my memories, William continued, his voice thickening. 6 years I should have spent watching Emma grow. 6 years I should have spent proving to you that I never stopped loving you, even when I couldn't remember why. I can't give those years back to either of you. No apology undoes what was taken. He stepped closer until only Emma stood between them, small and solemn and utterly essential to everything this moment meant. But I will spend every remaining year proving I never stopped loving you, William said, his voice breaking slightly on the final words. Not because I'm your king. Not because duty demands it. Because you and Emma are the only home I've ever actually wanted. Catherine's tears finally slipped free, though her smile broke through them completely unguarded for the first time since William had found her broken on that cottage floor. I spent 5 years believing you chose a crown over us, she whispered. I don't believe that anymore. I choose you too, William. Not the king. You. Emma looked between them, her small face lit with something bright and hopeful. Does this mean we're a family now? It means, William said, crouching to meet her eyes, that we always were. We just needed time to find our way back to each other. Under the full moon, with no priest, no crown, no audience beyond the ancient trees that had witnessed their first promise 5 years before, William and Catherine chose each other completely, not through political ceremony, but through a quiet, unshakable vow that needed no witnesses beyond the family standing together at last. Emma stood between them, princess in nothing but name, exactly where she belonged. Far beyond the borders of Blackthorn Kingdom, deep within a place the maps refused to name, a cloaked figure stood at the edge of a dark tower window, watching the scene unfold through a black moonstone cradled in his palm. The stone glowed faintly, pulsing with the same unnatural light that had once erased a woman from every record in a kingdom, that had once stolen 6 years from a king who never understood what he was truly fighting. The figure's mouth curved into something that was not quite a smile. The Alpha King has found his family, he murmured, his voice a whisper of satisfaction that carried no warmth at all. The moonstone pulsed once more, darker this time, hungrier. Now, he said softly, we take it away. Some promises take 5 years and a stolen memory to keep. Love this story? Follow for more and comment your favorite plot twist below, backhand index pointing down.